And you've written so many books in the meantime, so.
I'm finishing my 7th book right now.
This is another poetry book, or this is a book on writing?
This is another book that goes back to the industry. It's called Slump.
Oh, okay.
And it's about what to do as a creative person during that month or 3 between projects, or when you have no idea when the next project is coming because there was nothing lined up when you finished the last one.
That sounds great.
Because it is horrifying if you have no idea what's happening or you haven't done it before. Like, I can remember sitting in my office at LA Center Studios when MTV's Fear was wrapping up. And I sat at my desk and I just cried because it's like, this is it. I'm never going to work again. This is in 2001. 21 years ago, I was like, oh, I'm never going to work again. And now I've done 47 shows.
Wow.
You have to figure out, the aerial view of your career is lots of dots and dashes. And hopefully you have way more dashes than dots, in that you get to work for a long period of time, and then you don't work, and then you come in on a project for a week, or you come in on a project for 3 days, and then you find another job that's going to last, 2 months or 3 months. And that's just the way things are in the freelance universe. It's going to be feast or famine. You're going to buy a house, and then you're going to be terrified that you're going to lose the house. You're going to buy a Mercedes, and then you're going to be like, I'm going to lose the car because I spent all this money and I didn't plan. I didn't know what to do when things were down. I have had so much money wash over my hands on huge projects where I'm just like, this is great. And then I invest, and then I immediately have to pull the money back out because for 3 months, nothing happens because there wasn't anything going.
Do you think that if we're in a slump, and this is probably you're going into this in your book, and forgive me if I'm revealing parts from it, but that we need that fear because, there's some people that believe in, it's going to sound very, airy-fairy, but the abundance of the universe. And sometimes those people, they're waiting a little too long for things.
That is true. And I also think that there is an idea that once you have momentum, you will always have momentum. And it just doesn't work that way. It's there, if you're not actively leaning into things all the time, which is if you read Medavoy's book, that guy's always got something going on. If you can't stop and breathe, and it's really hard for me to even savor a success because I'm like, it's such a short period of time that you get to say, oh, the numbers are good. Oh, this is happening, because you haven't been working for a month. Because Post has been polishing the thing that you submitted, and you don't waste that. Don't waste the time between something ending and whatever you hope is coming down the pike, and you getting out to try to look for something. There is no time to just sit. On the other side of that coin is give yourself the opportunity to savor the wins. I didn't do that.
Okay.
And I paid the price for that. I worked 29 years, I took one vacation. In 21 years, I took one vacation, and it was to go to my roommate's destination wedding in Barbados. And you've never seen anybody so stressed out on a cruise ship.
That was you?
Yeah, I was just vibrating the whole time I was on the ship, just like, oh God, I gotta get back. And I couldn't I was at sea, so there was no cell reception unless you wanted to pay out the nose. And it was just like, I can't. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, we gotta get back. And it was 10 days. If you can't take 10 days off once every 10 years, you deserve what happened to me, which was I had a stroke. And that put me on my butt for a month and a half. Mm-hmm. And I was in no condition to work for probably a month or 2 after that, because I was trying to figure out how to get my left arm back, which was a little more important to me than, getting on to the next thing. You got to take care of your instrument, and that is you and your brain. So be nice.
Great point.
As Larry says, eat well and get a good mattress. That's what he tells all of his students when they graduate. It's like, eat well and get a good mattress, and you'll be fine. Because the quality of your sleep matters, and what you put in your body matters.
And
preach. I'm sorry.
No. I think it's important to share your story if you're willing to.
Well, yeah. I had a wonderful agent for many, many years, and she was always like, well, if you let anybody know you've ever had any kind of a medical issue, then it's going to be this whole big deal about whether you're going to be reliable on the shoot and this and that and the other. And I said, I'd rather people know that I can't work an infinite number of hours for you, because A, it's not necessary, and B, it's not good for me. You know, I like good TV, but I don't want to die for it. I haven't come up with a clever enough epitaph to be dead yet.
Don't go on a cruise.
Don't go on a cruise.
Because you're going to worry. But what if you did go on the cruise and hadn't worried?
Would
the job still have been there?
The Maria Bamford joke that she told 15 years ago, which is, she takes on these personalities in her comedy. She says, this is me and my agent on the phone. She's like, Maria, you can't go on vacation because I had a client that went on vacation for 2 weeks. And do you know what he does now? He drives a rickshaw. Like they just forgot about him in 2 weeks. And it's like, it's not quite real, but it's close enough to real that it's like, if you can't go off the map. So if I'm not working, I'm sending people cards, or I'm, trying to have lunch, which is a real thing. Like the Hollywood Let's Have Lunch isn't about, let's go hobnob with famous people. It's about, let's make sure I don't get forgotten.
Well, you had an interview with a gentleman who said, and I don't know how true this is, but find 4 restaurants.
Yes. And
go to those 4. You want to tell us the story?
Yes. Is one of the earliest pieces of advice I got. I always, when I meet a big producer, I say, what's the best mid-career advice you have for a producer? I don't want to know how to break in. I'm in. Like, what's the best mid-career? And he said, do you have your 4 yet? I said, what 4? And he goes, you need 2 great restaurants and 2 dumps. And then one of those on each side of the hill, meaning Beverly Hills, the Valley. It says, only go to those places for 20 years. And he goes, and what that does is if you ever have to take a meeting, you say, why don't we meet at such and so? And everybody there knows who you are. So you get treated like the Pope when you come in. They're so excited to see you. How nice to see you again. Da, da, da. You have a regular table somewhere if you can do that, because it makes you look like you have some kind of power and presence in town. And it sounds silly. I mean, I told that advice to somebody once and they were like, that is the most vain thing I can imagine. It's like, well, I have a regular table at such and so. When Gary Marshall died, every time I went to the smokehouse, I said, I want Gary Marshall's table Friday night at 8 o'clock. So I would always sit in a table that was associated with a very successful person before me. It's all about absorbing the energy of the people that aren't there anymore. That's why when like a famous person's house goes up for sale, it's always way over asking, because somebody's like, I'm going to live in a house that Frank Sinatra used to live in, or I'm going to live here because this person lived here in the 40s. They've been gone for 60 years. It's not going to pop out of the closet and go, you have some trouble with the end of Act 2. That's not how that works. But you're absorbing the energy of the dead, sort of, by being able to say, like, well, I have this regular routine. I do this. This is where I sit. And again, when you come in, you have a feeling of authority. In Slump, that has translated to when I feel terrible and I feel like there's no way that I'm ever going to get things back on track, I'd go to the same restaurants. I'll go to Musso and Frank. I'll go to the Smokehouse. Those are the restaurants I'd been going to for 20 years. I go there. I sit by myself in a booth that I used to sit in all the time. And I say, everything's going to be fine. And you feel like you're at home when you're not in your home. And it helps you feel like the whole world isn't collapsing around you, because you still have these little pillars of normalcy scattered around that you can go stand behind so the roof doesn't cave in on you.
Let me ask you this. When you go to the 2 quote-unquote dives, and one person's dive is another person's Musso and Frank's, because some people enjoy diner food, whatever. What are those? You don't have to tell me what they are, but where do you sit, and how do you know someone of importance sat in that little booth?
Well, usually I ask about the history of the restaurant, or why somebody's there. There's a place, it's not a dive, it's just not fancy. It's directly across the street from Warner Brothers, and it's called El Carpintero. It is a wonderful little Mexican restaurant. And the guy that runs it, Hector, had always wanted to have his own place, opened that. He's had the same 3 or 4 waiters forever. And they're the only people you ever see. And I got to the point where I was at a new restaurant once. And one of the waiters there had gone to work at this other restaurant. And he's still at El Carpintero. But I walked into the restaurant and I was like kind of getting the lay of the room and whatever. And there's this hand on my back and he goes, Troy, what are you doing here? And it's like instantly I'm family at this new place.
Sure.
Because this waiter remembers me because I went there all the time and I tipped like a pasha. Like it's
That helps.
make that place important to you and understand how restaurants work. Like if you go to the Palm for lunch, you're not going to sit in a booth because everybody in a booth is going to be the head of this or that or an SVP somewhere. And all the unwashed get to sit in the tables around the room. Like all the people that aren't as glamorous or exciting are not in booths. They're just scattered around during the open dining area on the tables.
So that illusion, though, is important. It is as vain as it sounds.
On some level, like Chuck Freeze, that was the guy I got that advice from about you're 2 and 2 and just go there for 20 years. He tells a story in there's a documentary about Chasen's, which many years ago was the of the moment place to go. And he walked in and he said, I could see these other tables. He goes, I'd always get seated in this one area, but I knew the first table's up in the front. So I was like, how do I get to those tables? Because then I'll know I've really got a presence if I get to those tables. And he basically eventually ended up sitting at tables in the front that like where Hitchcock used to go for lunch and like all these huge players. And that made him feel good. So much about this business and your longevity is about knowing how to make yourself feel good and value yourself. And people are very quick to say, you got a terrible ego. It's like, no, I have achieved things. It's about your mental health to feel like you have earned a place and you are somebody, if no one else is reminding you that you're somebody. Most of us are fairly unsung. I've done hundreds of hours of television and I can walk unmolested through the streets of any major city in this country. No one knows who I am. Or if they do, they come up and they go, you look like Karl Rove. Did anybody ever tell you that? That's why I don't wear wireless frames anymore. It's like, you look like Karl Rove. That's great. I'd rather look like somebody, somebody else.
But that being said, that it's important to feel good, especially when you put so much time into a project. But then you said something, maybe it was off camera, about having an outlet outside of the industry and how important that is.
It's a matter of knowing where to go to feel good about yourself. And to have those places, whether it's certain friends, like some of the best days of my life, even now, are had in rooms that are basically a ratty couch and Christmas lights and old posters of the Cocteau Twins. And it's like, why am I here? And it's just like, 30 years ago, I used to enjoy being here. And now I can just go and just melt and hang out with a friend and listen to music. And people that are obsessed with fame and start hanging on to famous people, it's the saddest thing in the world because it's like those people, most of the time, even if you're genuinely friends with them, they don't know who you are, or there are so many people pumping through your life that you don't, they don't have time to commit to, these friends that they've made in the last few years. They still know people that they went to University of Florida with 40 years ago.
So hanging on to something that's real.
Yes. And it's easy to do, and food is an easy way to do it, which is why I always say restaurants. It's a place where you can become part of a community. It's that whole Cheers thing. You just want to be where everybody knows your name. And even if that's, some guy that's just bringing you your drink, or you can walk into a place and they know what you're going to order, so it just comes to the table. That's the best. I watched a guy many years ago. I was at the Polo Lounge and I saw another, won't name the name, big A-list celebrity comes in. They seat him. His salad comes out of the kitchen in like 30 seconds, the McCarthy salad. And it's like he's been coming there for so long, they know what he wants and they're going to bring it out to him immediately. Or they know he has a reservation at noon and it's just ready when he comes in. There's got to be a wonderful comfort in that. I'm not quite there yet. I don't have that shorthand anywhere.
But being okay with, if you don't have it, that you have outside interests and you wrote poems and you've developed relationships with people that maybe aren't in the industry as a way to keep yourself grounded.
Yeah, and have a personal project once in a while.
Which you do.
And it's that thing where, you have to ask yourself every once in a while, this is an Allie Willis thing. It's like, does it have soul? Like this thing that I'm working on, does it have soul? That woman had so many crazy little personal projects. It was just shocking. You'd be like, oh, and I also did this animated short. It's like, oh, I didn't know you did that. oh yeah, there's this new animated short's coming out in 2 weeks, and this is going to happen, and this is happening, and I've got this side project here, that she had more control over as a personal project, so that she felt like she could really invest all of herself in something. And I always say, like, for me, the most important thing is that I'm making something that appeals to an audience that people are going to receive very well. There are small things I do that have way tinier audiences. When I did comic books, I published a comic book that, no joke, had 160 copies ordered by the distributor. It cost me more to print the book than I made on the book because it was such a small run and I paid so much to have the color separations done for it. And I never went back to comic books again. But I have one thing that I can look to and go, this is my comic book. Here's the intro by Weird Al Yankovic, which is the only reason anybody bought it, because it was one more thing that Weird Al had his name on. But that was it. And I was like, I got to do this. And if you made it, it's legitimate. That's the other thing. You know, I've self-published books on Amazon as well as working with publishers. And I'm as proud of the stuff that I did by myself on Amazon without an editor as I am with anything that I had published through anybody. Because it was mine and it felt like something I should do. I wrote a book called And Another Thing about the TV notes process, which is far from being, you know, the biggest selling book in the world because it's about a very niche thing. But it was a thing that was all the knowledge I had about something that meant a lot to me. And I figured somebody would identify with it. And I have a lot of execs and assistants and people like that look to that book for their first experience on how to give and get notes without it being a contentious process, which is part of my general mission. I don't think that making television should be a contentious process. We're all part of making something amazing that will hopefully live for a little while. So why not have a good time doing it?